Good morning and welcome to Church at Home with Rachael for Tuesday, the 17th of August. Time is certainly flying by. It's gotten a little cooler here. It's a bit chillier in the house in the morning, which is absolutely okay with me. Got my sweater on today, at least for a little while. Appreciate fall is my favorite season, so I'm looking forward to the Christmas of the fall. As we continue this week, I started asking by a question yesterday that I'm going to sort of look at these questions this week, talking about what does the church need to change, or how does the church need to adapt as we enter into a post-pandemic world. We're not there yet, and our numbers are climbing again, and our value is high again here in Alberta. But we do need to we've got to have hope. We have to think about where to go after this, when we find ourselves in a new normal. How are we going to move forward? So yesterday I asked that question about what was the role of the church in your life 5 years ago. What did you need from the church? What did you like that was happening in the church? What did you not need that the church was offering? What did you not like that the church was offering? Today I'd like to think about right now, this last 18 months, and really kind of ask the questions about what has the role of the church been in the last little while. During the pandemic, we have had to learn to adapt. Whether we liked it or not, we had to learn how to get used to things being different than they had been. Are there things about the way the church worked, so to speak, during the pandemic that you appreciated, did not appreciate? What did you find was helpful, or what did you find was not helpful? We've seen many different ways of church, and some of you are from the We congregation, so you have participated in our worship that was pre-taped and then aired on Sunday mornings, using both churches' facilities and volunteers to read and participate from both churches to try to sort of have an enhanced sense of community when we were going to be pre-recording and be online. For instance, I used phone calls and emails to try to stay in touch with people and to check in and see how they were doing. And we did a Lenten study online via Zoom. Some of those things worked really well. They were, of course, none of them were perfect because they aren't what we were used to. We weren't able to be in person. And for me anyway, true worship and true study comes from being in conversation with people face to face, where we can read the nuance of body language and we can sit together in silence, or we can all talk at the same time and not get cut off like happens in Zoom. There's a sense of realness in that, authenticity, and that's important. But during the pandemic, we had to try something different. Some churches went to having Zoom services. Others did live streaming, and some did every day they would do the morning prayer together, morning office. Lots of different churches, we had lots of different options of how to do worship, and different things were available in each diocese as each province was working through the pandemic in different ways. So what were some of the ways for you that you recognized that the church was adapting? What are some of the things that you appreciated, or at least could accept was as good as it could possibly be during the pandemic, the lockdown part of the pandemic for the church? And what did you appreciate? What did you find thrilling or life-giving? What did you not appreciate? What aspects did you think, just not the same, it's just falling short? I really didn't like that. The next question is reflecting on the past 18 months. What are some of the needs you discovered you have of the church? Were they met? If they weren't, what suggestions do you have? The church, I think that question even boils down a little bit more into what is it that you need of the church in the first place? If the church didn't meet needs that you had during the pandemic, what were those needs? And are they viably, or what's the question, what's the word I'm looking for? Are they things the needs that could actually be taken care of by a church that was locked down? How could we as a community, or me as a priest, reach out to you and help you work through those needs that you had? Maybe maybe some of the needs you discovered of the church were that you needed strength, and maybe you discovered that on your own, or discovered it through a different kind of community, because we were doing this. There is so much that's happened during the past 18 months. So many things have changed, and so many ways of thinking have changed. We've even moved to recognize that we have advertising now for TELUS, My Health and TELUS, house calls for doctors, meaning calls on the phone where you can pick up the phone and talk to a doctor about your health. Because for a lot of people, getting in to see a doctor became almost impossible, because if you were sick, you couldn't go in and see them, and lots of places shut down or had minimal hours or minimal visits available, and people were scared to go out. Everything has changed. Our needs have changed. The needs that we had, 19 months ago are different than the needs we have today, because in the intervening 18 months, we saw the world adapt in different ways, and we were faced with the reality that we needed to change the way that we expect things to happen. We became a lot more self-sufficient in many cases. We were able to discover that we had strength that we didn't know we had. And that is always a gift, regardless of how it comes, to discover the resiliency that is built right into who we are. And so I ask you those two questions today to think about, and to respond, if you like, in the comments, or to email me, or to talk to your own priest. During the pandemic, we have learned to adapt, whether we like to or not. Are there things about the way the church worked during the pandemic that you appreciated or didn't? What did you find helpful? What did you not find helpful? Because when we can nail down the answer to that question, it really helps us to move forward in understanding what happens if we have to lock down again. What do we need to change? What do we need to keep if we have to go back online, so to speak? But also, it helps us to know who we're becoming. Who is God calling us to be? What are the new needs of today's society, of our congregations, of our individuals? What are we needing to work toward, rather than work backward and say, well, this is what we've always done. Well, just because we've always done it doesn't mean we have to do it tomorrow. So we need to figure out what it is we need to do tomorrow. And the other question was, reflecting on these past 18 months, what are some needs you have discovered you have of the church? Were they met? And if not, do you have suggestions on how they could be met? What kinds of things did you realize in your life were lacking because you didn't have the ability to go to church, go to worship, or to a study, or to a gathering, to a fellowship group? What kinds of things did you find that you needed of the church? I know these are big questions, but I don't believe that God has asked us to simply float along. I think that although we are tired after this pandemic, after getting through this much of the pandemic, I think that we are still called on. It's like a marathon. We're sort of hit the 2/3 mark, and we still have work to do. But when we complete this, when we get through the other end, and we discover not just that we're through the pandemic, but we're into that place where we're able to reflect and really seek out and find the ways that God has called the church to change, called us to adapt and become more relevant with the most relevant news, that is the gospel of Jesus Christ. How will we be able to do that better because of the lessons we learned in this pandemic? That's what I'm asking of you, to take this seriously and to really help me, help your priest, help your other people in your congregation, or if you don't have a congregation, the people that you exist with and around. How do you have these conversations? How do we discover, where do we go next? Thank you for joining me today for Church at Home with Rachael. I'll be back tomorrow with a few more questions about where does the church go from here. Have a wonderful day. God bless you, and I will see you tomorrow.